Hi, I'm Eric Swartz, WA6HHQ with Elecraft. Welcome to Ham Expo. I'm going to be talking about the K4 direct sampling high performance transceiver today. The K4 covers 160 through 6 meters, all modes at 100 watts. We also have dual receivers in all versions of the radio and also dual pan adapters, so you can monitor 2 places in the band or also 2 different bands at the same time if you want on the pan adapters. The K4 also has ultra-clear receive audio. What does that mean? That means if you're operating a contest or doing a lot of DXing, after a long period of time, you're not going to have that fatigue you get in a lot of radios with higher distortion on receive. And on top of that, we've got an excellent high-resolution touchscreen display. Gives you easy access to things like our band buttons and advanced features on the radio. We've also got an ATU option for the K4 that also includes receive antenna switching to give you up to 5 receive sources per receiver, and also can match up to a 10-to-1 SWR. The ATU also has memories per band, per frequency segment, and per antenna to make it easy to quickly change bands and recall memories from the automatic antenna tuner. So we've got extended digital and analog I/O on the K4. What this means is, in the case of, say, COM ports, we've got multiple ways of talking to the radio. We've got a USB connection to the computer that gives you actually 2 virtual COM ports that the computer sees, totally independent. Also, we've got a legacy 9-pin RS-232 COM port that again could be talking to step-IR antennas or other devices that want to know what frequency we're on, simultaneously with what's going on the other COM ports. Also, we've got Ethernet I/O. You can send commands over that, all the same commands you could send to the radio of our regular command set for logging programs or remote control. That additionally can stream audio and pan adapter data from the radio to external applications. So by having this flexibility on the radio with multiple COM ports and of course the Ethernet port, you get the ability to have multiple applications talking to the radio. One of the important features of the K4 is also that the radio is a modular radio, which is easy to upgrade both for new technologies as they come out, but also going between the different models of the radio. From a technology standpoint, for instance, take the K4 analog to digital converters that reside on our digital down converter card. In a K4, basic K4, we have a single one of those, and a K4D we have 2. Say a new technology in analog to digital converters comes out 5 years down the road. One of the neat things about the K4 is those are on little plug-in modules in the radio. So that allows you to quickly, when we do come out with updated versions of that, upgrade the performance of the radio, much as we did with the synthesizers on the K3 to the K3S when folks upgraded their radios with the new synthesizers that we came out with that. You can do that also on the K4. If I can't guarantee when, obviously, but when there's new technology, we'll look certainly seriously providing new modules in that area or other areas of the radio. But also this modularity allows you to easily upgrade from a K4 to a K4D to a K4HD. Those are our 3 versions of the radio. The K4 basically is a single analog to digital converter radio, direct sampling at 122.8 megahertz. And what this does is still give you 2 receivers in the same band, or if you turn off the bandpass filters, even in different bands, if you're going through a dedicated receive antenna that doesn't have the low-pass filters our transmit antenna has. But that gives you the ability to listen on 2 frequencies at once, but not use more than 1 antenna at the same time for the 2 receivers. The K4D adds another direct digital down converter, another set of bandpass filters, preamps, etc. And you basically now have 2 independent receivers totally in the sense you can run, and they're identical. So you can bring them in from 2 different antennas. Say one's on the transmit antenna, another one's on a dedicated receive antenna. They can be on different bands in the same band. And so you can be optimized antennas on 2 different bands and watching them on the pan adapter, watching them, listening to them and talking, switching back and forth. But also, you've got the ability to do what we call diversity reception, which is where you're on the same frequency with both receivers, but using 2 antennas, one to each of these 2 receive paths. We feed one to your left ear, one to your right ear. And one of the key things with diversity, if you have your antennas oriented at different heights or different physical locations on your property, frequently, especially in low bands, when you have weak signals, the band conditions are changing. They'll be fading up and down, but they don't fade exactly the same on both antennas. So as one goes down the noise, the other one might be going down a little bit or going up even. You still got it there. This guy comes back out of the noise, and this one goes down to the noise, but you've not lost the signal the whole time you're listening to that. That's a really cool feature, and it's just like you double the size of your antenna sometimes. In contests, it means you've got less requirements to get fills on calls that you missed, things like that. Certainly when you're DXing and looking for rare stations, you're hopefully going to find more and be able to make that contact and get the whole contact completed. When you go to the K4 HD, and this is really extreme cases where you need extra blocking dynamic range, and it's not really a critical thing for most people, but we wanted to give it as a resource, so if people need it, you could add that in. You can actually switch the feature on and off also. It provides basically a additional superhet front end with crystal filtering in front of the analog to digital converters in the K4, and we can switch that in and out. So that gives you all the benefits we already had, but with the additional blocking dynamic range. So that covers really the whole range of upgradeability on the radio, and literally those are ones that can be done in the field or certainly at the factory. Some people ask if you can go from a K4, the basic K4, all the way to the K4 HD. And the answer is yes. You basically end up getting all the parts for a K4D, the in-between radio, to get to the K4 HD. The K4 HD, of course, has dual receivers also, but you need to have the capability that we've got in the K4D to go to the HD. Lastly, the K4 has, coming out later this year, a optional internal transverter module, either VHF or VHF UHF. We haven't determined exactly the final configuration on it, but we have working units in the lab right now. And this gives you the ability to use the fourth antenna connection that we've got in the back, and that'll be coming out later this year, as I mentioned, but also we've got an external transverter interface that lets you, of course, hook up to a large number, I think it's either 8 or 10 external transverters, and specify on a unique transverter band button display what the displayed frequency on the radio is, and of course what the internal IF we're using on the radio to talk to your transverter. So that's the quick overview of the K4. Next, I'm going to really do a deep dive into the features of the K4, how we use them, show you how the screen interface, and of course the physical buttons on the radio, and the overall capabilities of the K4. So before I get started, I got to put on my reading glasses because as we get older here, I certainly need these for any of my ham radios when I'm operating them. So excuse me while I've got these on, but I'd like to give you a feel for how the radio operates now and all the key features we've got in it. We'll do it a fairly fast session here, and we'll be also doing a demo in the Q&A after this part of the talk. And so during the question and answer session that you can go into, I'll be able to give you more direct answers to questions and show you how other stuff on the radio that I haven't covered here that you might have questions about. Starting off with the K4, we basically have an optimal, we feel, combination of physical buttons and also, of course, on-screen buttons. And in many cases, they're redundant, so you can choose to do it any way you want. On the left side, of course, power button at the top. These are mostly transmit functions over here, though we do have a couple of receive antenna select functions for selecting which receive antenna path, either off the transmit path or off of a dedicated receive antenna. You can change the transmit receive antenna with the ANT button over here. Also, we have Vox and QSK on off, and also the auto tuner. You can put it in line. You can have it do an automatic tune if you want to teach it a new frequency. And also a regular tune button, which you can do tune either at full power that you've got dialed up. I think I have 97 watts here if I put it in tune. Or you can hit tune low power, which is a menu entry. You can set what your low power tune might be. It might be 10 watts or 20 watts. And also an XMIT, just like a PTT transmit button here. And also test mode. I'll push that there. You can see a little test come on the screen here. Test mode basically lets you test the functions of the radio out in transmit, but not really transmitting. There's a USB jack here. I happen to have a little USB mouse dongle plugged in, and I've got a mouse plugged into the radio. I'll use, by the way, on the touchscreen when I get to it, a mouse or your finger to select items. So you've got a dual choice for that. We have 3 knobs here, and these allow you to adjust various parameters that are on the left-hand side of the screen. The top one is labeled XMitter or transmitter. And that lets you adjust. In my case here, I'm adjusting power on the little lower guy here. If I tap the knob or I tap the screen, I can move. You can see back and forth there. I can go up to the pitch, Morse code here, and set the pitch for Morse code. If I'm in sideband mode, I can set the mic gain, compression level, things like that. So this knob basically controls those 2 items. Next one down is filter. So I'm just adjusting bandwidth right now, as you can see as I adjust it. If I tap it, I can do shift. So you have shift and width here. I'm going shifting back and forth the frequency, and I don't have it zoomed in right now, but you'd see it actually shifting or changing width on the cursor on the pan adapter when I do that too. If I go back up here and I tap the screen or hold it here, it'll go to high cut, low cut, which in essence gets you to the same bandwidth and shift if you're doing it manually. But say you only want to cut the high frequencies off, you can dial those down, say on sideband or CW as an interfering station. You're trying to just tighten the filter that way. And then if you tap this or tap the screen to go back and forth, you can do the low frequencies also and cut those off. If you get lost, you can push and hold it, and it puts it back to a default setting for whatever mode you're in, which is handy too. Bottom line here, we've actually got either squelch, or usually I have it in the RF section. So you have RF gain for the main receiver, and I tap it, or again, tap back and forth, RF gain for the sub receiver. Going across here, we've got memories here for both CW memories, digital voice memories. You can recall them here. You can set up and do long-term like loop record for audio frequencies that you want to play back on the radio, audio frequency off the receive side. And of course, you can hit play here to play it back for yourself or for people over the air. Main buttons we've got here are the same you have actually on the K3. We've got preamplifier, attenuator, noise blanker, noise reduction, notch filter, both manual and automatic, and also a filter button here in addition to the constantly changing bandwidth on the filter you have here on the left. Over here I can hit the filter button, and if you're watching here on the screen, you'll see me. I have stored 4 different filter widths and shifts in some cases. So you can have your favorite settings there and just rotates through them, which is handy. Bottom row, we have the VFO control. It's right above the VFO A knob. And you can do A-B select, so you can swap the VFOs if you want. Reverse just temporarily reverses them, so you can listen on the other frequency until you release it. Don't press it anymore, so you want to listen to your transmit frequency if you're in split. A to B copy, or B to A if you hold this button. Spot generates a side tone. I have it turned down pretty low right now, but you can use that when you're spotting, or if you push and hold it, it'll automatically, if you're within a couple hundred hertz on Morse code, tune the receiver right to the desired side tone offset that you set in the radio, say 600 hertz, 500 hertz, something like that. And we have a mode button here, and that brings up modes on the screen. I can change it to sideband, upper sideband. If I tap it again, it's lower sideband. Data mode, AFSK, FSK, PSK we have built in, also FM and AM functions. We've also got direct frequency entry, and you can type in the little numbers you see in red on here. That gives you the ability to direct frequency hop around the band. You can just say I want to be on 14020, and you're right there. All the yellow functions you hold the button to get to. So I can lock A. You can see a little lock function. I can push it and hold it, and I locked B. Now the VFOs don't affect it at all, so if you bump it, it doesn't change frequency. And I can unlock them too. This is VFO A, VFO B here on the smaller knob. So I have A there, B there. And this is receive incremental tuning. If I turn it on, you can see this box gets a little highlighted in the middle for XIT or RIT. So you can fine tune that and also clear it and turn it back off if you want to. B set is an important knob. If you want to adjust functions on the VFO B, everything from turning preamps on, attenuators, you just tap the B set button. We pop that icon up on the screen to remind you. And now if I hit noise blanker on and off, you'll see it right here on the screen. Noise blanker comes on and off. And actually I have the noise blanker on the pan adapter. We have a noise blanker there too, linked. So if you have any pulse noise coming through from like automobiles, spark plugs, or anything else, electric fences, you can also clean up the pan adapter with that. You can also have them unlinked if you want also. That gives you an idea for the physical controls on the radio. The K4 supports our external KPod tuning knobs. I have 2 of them hooked up here. They can be selected for VFO A, VFO B, and RIT, XIT on one unit, switching back and forth here. But I have this one set to A and this one set to B right now. And so if I want to have just on the table, say next to my keyboard if I'm contesting, I can just reach over and tune VFO A that way, VFO B that way. So you've got 2 big knobs. It's your choice, 1 knob, 2 knobs, or if you're crazy like I was earlier, I had one for RIT there too. The next thing I'm going to cover is the on-screen features, both the pan adapter and the key buttons you can access on the screen. So looking at the screen here, right now I've got VFO A and VFO B on. I'm watching CW on 40 meters. I think I've got some of that turned up here. If I turn up and tune the band. There we go. This, by the way, is an IQ recording of the 7QP contest from a while back. And we've got about 100 kilohertz of spectrum RF for the radio. And that's coming actually through 2 of the receive antenna jacks. And one of the key things I wanted to show you real quick is from a receive antenna standpoint, I mentioned you can select 5 different antennas on the radio for each receiver. You can choose which one of the 5 you want to use, either a transmit antenna or 2 dedicated receive antennas also, ports on the back. The button on the left here called RX antenna, I'll bring that up. I'll tap it first. If I tap it, it gives me for the main receiver. I'll hold it here. You'll see this change the left-hand side from main to sub. So right now I've got the main coming in RX2. I could put it in the TX antenna, which right now doesn't have anything on it, so you're going to see the band go dead. But I can set it to RX1, and there you are. And correspondingly, if I push and hold it for the sub receiver, that's coming on RX2. I happen to have two BNCs on the back of the K4. That basically, one's for a dedicated receive in out, where you can even put something in the normal receive path, but you can make it a dedicated receive antenna. And the other one is our transverter I/O, and if you're not using an external transverter, you can use that as the fifth receive antenna port. With the A2 installed, you've got 3 transmit receive antennas, and you can pick one of those also. So you can go antenna 1, antenna 2, antenna 3, and so on. So as you see it right now, I've got it set up with the main screen being duplicated on the external screen, which is useful for demonstrating it or showing off to friends. But I also can do it where I show just the pan adapter on there. And I'm going to switch that by going into the menu here and choosing the external monitor function and changing from mirror LCD to pan adapter only mode. And now we have a dedicated pan adapter on the external screen. Much larger. You don't have all the buttons taking up space. Much easier to see all the activity. And what's really cool, I can even have just on the external screen, if I want to do this, I can go into the display function here and change just on external pan A only. I could be looking at the whole CW band, or I could be looking at the sideband band, pan B, or I can go back to split, which is sort of cool. Same thing on the internal pan adapter too, or if I'm mirroring it, but this way it's a dedicated pan adapter. You can have different things going on here than there, which is sort of nice also. Magic, we're back to mirroring the pan adapter again for you. So just walking through a few of the key features on the screen now. One of the key ones, the important one, is the band button, which is right here in the middle. And if I hit band, these are nice big buttons, so I can use my thumb on it. It's not tiny finger stuff. I can change the band, say, on the VFO-A, and I say it's on 7 megahertz. So actually, I'm in VFO-B set right now. B set button changes who you affect. So if I take that off, I'm now changing VFO-A. I put it in 80 meters. There's nothing coming on 80 on this one. I'm just feeding 7 megahertz stuff from 40 meters. But I can go back to band and switch that back to 7 megahertz. And hey, there's signals again. And I can do the same thing on VFO-B by doing what's called B set, which is where you can set, I mentioned earlier, preamp and anything else for VFO-B while you're using the radio. But I also can change the band for VFO-B by just doing that. So I can put it on 21 megahertz, but there's nothing there on this right now. So we go back to 14 where so that's the band button. The other important stuff on the screen here, I mentioned menu, which is not something you have to get into very often. That's setup parameters, setting baud rate for COM ports, getting, as I mentioned before, what you want your external display to be doing, things like that. You can look at what your IP address is if you've got Ethernet plugged into it, which is handy. And you can go through a whole bunch of other basic setup functions. Things like the display button, that sets up your pan adapter. I can set span, I can change the reference level. We also have auto reference level, which tracks across changes in background noise during the day to night transition on a band, for instance. So you don't have to even pay attention to it in the contest, which is nice. We also have the ability to change the scale, how many dB you're seeing, and how much you're compressing that down if you want on the pan adapter scale. And also you're able to do things like adjust the intensity of the waterfall history you see going down there. We can also make the colors go to the brighter end of the spectrum earlier. It's basically a multiplier. And we also can go through and change the span, the center frequency. We can even freeze the display. And you can, because we have ability to do screen captures here, so you could capture the screen if you wanted. And you also can turn the noise blinkers on and off. I think I mentioned earlier that I think I have the noise blinkers linked right now between the main radio and the pan adapter. You can see it on VFO-B right now. If I go back to VFO-A, they're turning off right there. So you don't have to worry about it and do it. You don't have to do it separately, though you can do it separately inside the pan adapter menu. A couple of setup menu things here. On the right, you have main receiver, sub receiver, and transmit. And so setting up the main receiver is doing things like I mentioned. You could pick which receive antennas you can pay attention to when you're pushing the receive antenna button. If I only have one antenna hooked up, there's no need even to switch between them, so I could turn off the checkboxes for those, use a subset. Or I can say just use antenna 1 and 2, and it'll toggle between those two. You don't have to rotate through an unused antenna. We also have a receive equalizer, so just like a graphic equalizer on your stereo, I can just manually slide these up and down with my finger. You can tap on one and use the VFO to fine tune it. You can also use the minus and plus to fine tune it also. If it's all screwed up, hit flat, and it flattens it all the way back for you. And you can see which band frequencies you're adjusting. Line out, set your line out level. Left channel is VFO-A, right channel is VFO-B. That's either over, we have a built-in sound card, so that's either over the built-in sound card line out, going out, and also over those physical line in, line out buttons if you want also. One neat feature with this also is we'll set up here, we can actually go through under the configuration for this, we can actually, on the input side, select whether you're using the physical line in or the sound card line in. It always drives the line out, it's physical and the sound card at the same time. But line in, you can select which one you want. So you can leave the cable plugged in, the line in, and select that without having to change cables when you want to go to that. So that's the main receiver. We can also turn AGC off at this point and set the APF bandwidth to different bandwidths for the automatic peaking filter. And you can also turn on text decode. So if I'm decoding data modes, you can pick 1 line or 3 lines of text decode on the screen and have it decode CW, RT2Y, or PSK31 in the K4. Sub-RX, exactly the same thing for the sub-receiver. I won't go through all of them. Transmit is your transmit side setup. Antenna config again. Here, we're picking which transmit antennas you have. Right now I say all, or I could just say, show me antenna 1 and antenna 2, and it would just toggle between those. Here. A couple other things, mic input. You've got the ability to pick front panel, rear panel. We've got 1/8" jacks in the back for rear panel for headphone and mic. Line in instead of the mic inputs, so you can pick line in coming in. And then we also can go through and configure the setup so that bias is on and off if you have a condenser mic on the front mic or the rear mic. Also, you can go through and change a preamp on the microphone. So 10 dB or 20 dB on the front. I think it gives you either 10 or 10 and 20 on the back. You can also, if you have a situation where you have a mic that has buttons on it, you can make the up-down buttons on the mic be useful or not, so you can turn those on and off. So that's all built in here. That's quick to set up all that stuff. You just tap it and get it going if you want to quickly adjust. I'm displaying quite a bit of breadth on the pan adapter right now. I think about 100 kilohertz. When you're tuning around a signal, how do you know you're tuned in close to it or what's around you? Well, if you actually, by the way, if the mouse, if you're using 2 VFOs, if you left-click the mouse, that moves the VFO, and you notice that little window popped up. I'll explain that in a second. That moves VFO-A. If I right-click, it's VFO-B moving around. I go back over here. If I hold it down and I'm dragging the mouse, I can actually drag it a little bit and fine-tune. You can see that moving down on this thing. This is basically a zoomed-in screen that's plus minus 5 kilohertz. We call it the mini pan. I can actually force that on by tapping the S meter too. So I can have that on all the time. Now that's showing the zoomed in, my cursor's in the middle. VFO-A, by the way, is sort of teal blue, VFO-B is green, so that's how you can tell which is which. You could have them both in the same window if you want to. And you can see where they are and what the width of them is, so that's sort of handy on the system too. The center line here actually is where you're tuned and the width of the offset. I think I have offset on my shift, so if I hold it back to standard here, actually get out of USB, that's why it's confused. Let's get back to CW. And then there's my CW tune right in the middle, and I've got that fine-tuned. Here we go. I'm in B set, let me get out of that. And then we go here. There we go. Now you can see me widening and narrowing the width there too, which is sort of neat in the mode that I'm in for CW or CW reverse. But this is neat. You can do this for both of them. So there's the other one for the sideband part of the band. There you're showing 5 kilohertz also. I think this is 2 kilohertz. I had that in sideband before. I didn't catch that. So it's plus minus 2 kilohertz when you're in CW. So that's the mini pan. It's a very useful tuning indicator. If you have digital modes, RTTY, we give you some tuning lines for the mark and space tones also. Of course, we have built-in S meters here. When you go into transmit, let me put it in transmit test. I'll just show you some of the other metering that shows up here. If I go into transmit, you're going to see SWR, ALC, RF, and also you can see compression on there too if you want to look at that. So you get the best benefit of all those when you're transmitting. Yeah. One neat feature that we've got in the K4 that we haven't had in our other radios is actually a very detailed built-in manual, and that's actually updated automatically every time you update software in the radio. So I'll also show you the software update after I show you the manual here. If you look down the lower left-hand corner of the screen, there's a question mark, and that's when you want an answer to a question. If you just hit a button, it will bring you up into the manual section of that button that you just hit. But you can also go into the index, just I'm doing now, just by tapping it. And you can actually even make it full screen. So if I reach here in this icon here, now I've got the whole manual. You can quickly scroll through it with the VFO. I can, of course, drag up and down the screen with my finger. Say I want to look at rear panel connections. I tap on that, and it displays all the key things you need to know about the rear panel connections on the radio. You can go back to the smaller mode here, and then you've got these icons here. You can go back to previous section where you were happened to be the root. If I was in one of these functions and want to just get back to the index, this little icon with the bars takes you back to it also. So we have everything from introduction, using the radio, getting set up, front panel reference, operating instructions, obviously for primary functions, antennas. So the whole idea is anytime you need a quick answer to a question, it's right in front of you. You don't have to pull the manuals out and take a look at them. And actually, and this actually is always going to be the most recent thing you're going to get that's the most accurate. So that's a real handy feature. So both context sensitive, where you can hit a button and then hit question mark and say, how's this going to operate? And it'll tell you what it's doing too. So it gets you to that quickly to that section. We also have a search function, so you can search on words and search through it. And I mentioned last control is this button here. So we can see what's the last control I hit. Happened to be to configure the transmitter, because we were setting that up last. And it's going to give me the transmitter information. I can hit return to get out. I think I can hit question mark again too. Yeah, it just toggles back out. So it doesn't take up a lot of time on the screen. The last feature I'd like to cover is our software update facility that's built into the radio. So if you don't have Ethernet hooked up to your radio, we can actually still download a software update file over the internet on a computer that you've got, and you can then copy it into a USB flash drive that you can plug into the front or back of the radio and load it that way, and basically talk to it from our software update window. So it's pretty straightforward. But if you're hooked up to the Ethernet, it's just literally you check for updates and take a look at it. And I'll show you really quickly here how it operates. So all I have to do is go into our function key display section, and you can display a software list to see what's in the software. I'm just showing what's in the radio. Also, I can push and hold that and go into update. And I can set from a number of folders. I've got production release folder at the top. That's what most customers will see. Just as a note, you can also see as a customer previous production release if you want to back up one, and beta release if you want to be on the bleeding edge and try something new. And what's nice is you can, if you have a problem and you can't wait for us to fix that, you can always go back to the production release, the current production release. You can also, though, load from a USB drive, as I mentioned earlier. So that's what we've got here. But from production release, all I have to do is check for updates, and actually I have some stuff in the radio here. It's going to show that, oh, I need an update. I'm not going to do it right now, but you would just push the install button, sit back, and you're going to see the progress bars go across the screen, and it'll tell you when it's complete, and you're all done. And then you just exit the routine. And if you've done an update, you exit update program, you'll actually shut the radio down. You'll see it go turn off, and you just turn it back on, and you're back in operation. Another cool feature of the K4 is we built remote operation into it as part of the internal architecture. We have a client-server architecture inside, and one thing it supports is multiple instances of our user interface that you see on the screen here, and of course the way we interface with buttons on the front panel and so on. And so we can actually have another K4 controlling this one, or we can have a K4 Mini that we'll be coming out with later this year, controlling it over the internet or over the local network. And also a software application could be. Actually at Dayton we had both a K4 Mini mock-up, actually in a full-size K4 box, and a tablet running just a screen portion of the user interface. So I've got on a tablet here, actually, the software. This is like a sneak peek on the software developing. This is right now called Virtual K4. And this running on a Windows 10 desktop or a tablet like this, basically will be able to control and basically operate the K4 remotely. And this is in development, so it won't be out till later this year. But that will be able to do similar to what we were planning to do when we released the K4 Mini also for control, but obviously at a software level. And one other note, we'll be able to support, like we can support an external monitor here, we'll be able to support an external window of this application. Say you're on a desktop or here, if you have a way of hooking a second monitor up to your computer, we can display it there, or just in another window on a big screen. So that gives you a feel for the radio. It's there's a lot more to it, certainly, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. So hang around. We'll have a little bit of time before the next session comes up, and I'll be glad to answer questions for people. Thanks a lot.